Week 1 of the fantasy football season is in the books. Some of us are happy with the outcomes of the first weekend, some of us not so much. But either way, no matter whether you won or lost, there's always a way to keep improving your team through the waiver wire. Let's break down the top pickups from week 1 and the guys that are injured that you need to know about and who is going to potentially replace them. The biggest blow from the opening weekend was undoubtedly to the Baltimore Ravens running back room, and this one it's just tough to swallow because whether you're a fan of Baltimore or not, whether you're a fan of J.K. Dobbins, you have to feel terrible for the guy. He can't catch a break. Already recovering from severe knee injury last year, looked like he was gonna maybe finally have that breakout season, and he was playing for a new contract no less. Well, he's done for the year for sure because he tore his Achilles early in the game. He's done. So obviously for a fantasy perspective, he should be dropped everywhere. Now, who's going to fill the void there? It's hard to say right now. It looks like it's going to be a combo of the guys who they have on the roster. That's Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. Now, in the past, Edwards has done some work. He kind of ran as the 1B in that backfield prior, and Justice Hill hasn't done much, but they shared carries in this game. Both got 8 touches. Edwards is more effective as a runner, but Hill scored 2 touchdowns, which is interesting because he's getting the goal line work, even though he's the smaller back, and Gus Edwards definitely the superior short yardage back. So who knows what's going on there. Hill should catch more passes. Edwards should score more touchdowns. It's going to be a combo. I don't know that I'm going to run out to add either of these guys right now. Neither of them has the talent level of a Dobbins, but if you need a replacement, one or both could do. You might recall Baltimore also signed Melvin Gordon earlier in the preseason, relegated him to the practice squad. He probably gets called up, but I'm not going to advise you to pick him up. Then in Green Bay, Aaron Jones had a huge day against the Bears, including 2 touchdowns and over 120 total yards. But on his second long touchdown run, he did pull up with a hamstring injury. That's kind of the bane of our existence, isn't it, these days, those hamstring injuries. We'll see how severe it is if he does have to miss time. That means A.J. Dillon gets this backfield basically all to himself, which definitely makes him interesting if he is still available. He's drafted in a lot of leagues, but not all of them. And then at receiver, I definitely would have put in a strong recommendation for Jacoby Myers as a waiver wire pickup. Last year it seemed like Derek Carr only had eyes for Devontae Adams, and nobody else in that Raiders offense really did a whole lot in the passing game. And Jimmy Garoppolo is like, nah, I'm good. I got Jacoby Myers here. He led the team with not only 9 catches, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but 10 targets compared to 9 targets for Devontae Adams. Well, unfortunately, late in the game, Myers hit hard, out with a concussion. Could cost him next week. In the past, it was a good chance, that clearing the protocol would take a week, maybe 2. Nowadays, NFL, thankfully, a little more stringent on these things, and so he could miss a game, maybe 2. It all depends. The obvious replacement here would be Hunter Renfrow, who plays the slot, but Renfrow didn't even get a single target in this game, so I don't know that I'm rushing out to pick him up either. And then I was expecting a big game from Tyler Lockett against the Rams. Didn't happen because he also left with concussion, or at least was under the protocol. Well, Jackson Smith and Jigba now gets a chance to step up if Lockett does have to miss time. Of course, always check injury reports throughout the week, but as of right now, that's the situation with Lockett. Adding injury to insult in the Steelers' rout by the 49ers. Deontay Johnson, also hamstring injury, so you're definitely going to have to monitor him. Could miss next week. And Pat Freiermuth left early with a chest injury. His does not sound too serious, and so good chance he plays next week, which actually could make him more appealing if Deontay Johnson is not playing, could mean more targets for Muth. And I know it was scary to see Anthony Richardson, after having a pretty good game there toward the end, trying to mount a comeback, leave the game with what appeared to be a knee injury, giving way to Gardner Minshew. Well, it seems like he's fine. In fact, in the words of his head coach, Shane Steichen, he'll be all right. All right, now it's time to get to the top waiver wire pickups heading into week 2. And there's a lot of names worth mentioning. We're going to go through a top 10 list here. And let's start with, I think, the headliner, a guy that some people had not even heard of. Look, that the Rams were without Cooper Kupp. Obviously, that's going to be the case for at least 4 more weeks. So, a lot of us just assumed that Van Jefferson's going to be the guy there. Tyler Higbee should clearly benefit. And of course, it was neither one of those guys. It was the rookie, Puka Nacua. That's right. The guy who was the 5th round pick out of BYU just stepped up and immediately became Matt Stafford's favorite target. And you thought he didn't know any of the rookies' names. What's crazy is it not just that he went for 119 yards on 10 catches in his NFL debut, he saw 15 targets. Matt Stafford only completed 24 passes the whole game, and 10 of them went to Puka. We were told he was going to be the number 3 receiver for the Rams coming into the season. Clearly that was a lie. He's the number 1 guy there, and I think we have to treat him as that until things change or until Cooper Kupp comes back. Now, he obviously looks like a strong ad. Have to worry a little bit about next week's matchup. They get the Niners. We saw what the Niners defense did to the Pittsburgh Steelers in their passing game. So don't expect a repeat, but still go ahead and add him. And now a case where I guess we were not fooled because Nick Sirianni didn't lie. He actually came out and said Kenneth Gainwell is his guy. He's the RB1, and he definitely was. Rashad Penny, a healthy scratch, didn't even suit up for the game. DeAndre Swift is just non-existent. He got 1 carry. Boston Scott, 1 carry. Kenneth Gainwell, 14 carries. He also caught 4 passes for 20 yards, which we know that's his thing. He's a pass-catching running back, but he was the everything running back for the Eagles this game. For a team that's always used a committee and that brought on DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, you'd think for a reason. I mean, it's hard to believe that it's going to be just Gainwell, all Gainwell going forward, but right now that's what it is. And so until we see differently, we have to treat him like an RB1 for one of the best offenses in the league. And now another running back that didn't think would be the number 1 guy in his backfield, but he was technically. Tyler Algier in Atlanta did get the most run. Now, Bijan was the starter, and Bijan looked pretty good, but Tyler Algier outcarried him 15-10. Tyler Algier also got 2 touchdowns, both in the red zone. We knew Algier would be involved still. He wasn't just going to be a complete bench player because of Bijan. Didn't expect him to get more touches than Bijan right away. Now, I keep saying this a lot. In fact, all rookie running backs get eased into things these days. That's just how it is. So eventually, it will be Bijan getting more touches than Algier. But for now, Algier definitely has a role. And look, I don't think it matters. This is a 1-2 punch that is working. Atlanta is just going to run the ball as much as possible. It seems like Algier could have standalone value all year long. I realize he's owned in about half or a little more than half of all fantasy leagues, depending on where you play. Might be snatched up, but if he's not, this is the time to grab him. Now, I know Zach Moss is not owned in a lot of fantasy leagues. He didn't even play in week 1, still recovering from a hand injury. But I guarantee he'll play in week 2 if he's good to go. Deion Jackson, as the starter, fumbled twice. Didn't look that great. Evan Hull, the intriguing rookie out of Northwestern, hurt his knee. Look, there was a good chance Moss was going to take over as a starter anyway when he came back. But given what's happened in that backfield, and of course Jonathan Taylor, if he does come back in week 5 as reported, it may not be with the Colts. So there's still a good chance a trade happens. So Zach Moss could be the lead back for this offense, which honestly didn't look as bad as I thought it would. Remember, Moss was the starter to end last season, and he was pretty good. Both between Buffalo and Indy last year, he averaged 4.9 yards per carry. And he's a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. So this is a time to stash him. Let's go back to receiver and talk about a guy in New Orleans. A guy that we've been on all preseason, loved as a late-round flyer. That's Rashid Shaheed. Didn't surprise me much to see him go for 89 yards and a touchdown. He's serving as a vertical threat there in that offense. Derek Carr can throw the deep ball, will throw the deep ball, and Shaheed got targeted in the end zone, which you love to see. Michael Thomas is still out there. He's healthy, made it through an entire game. Props to him. But you know what? Having him out there, it looks like that's not going to hurt. It might actually help Shaheed. He's not a guaranteed target hog. He's not a guy who's going to be consistently good. He's going to have his ups and downs, but you need some of that volatility. You just want that weekly upside. If you have to dig a little bit deeper, how about a guy that was completely forgotten about, and that's in New England? Easy to forget about all those receivers. Well, one receiver did reign supreme in week 1. That's right. The Bourne supremacy is upon us. I couldn't resist. Kendrick Bourne, 2 touchdowns, but more importantly, out of his 6 catches, 64 yards, came on 11 targets. Now, I get the Patriots were in comeback mode. They had to pass a ton. May not always be that much pass volume in this offense, but looks like Kendrick Bourne's getting the bulk of it because, remember, Tyquan Thornton was placed on IR. Devontae Parker was hurt, missed this game. He's always hurt. And other than that, they got 2 rookies at receiver in Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas. Did I forget Juju? Yeah, I forgot Juju's still there. He really didn't do much of anything worth talking about anyways. Bourne's the main guy there. Bourne looked good and could get a lot of targets also next week against Miami, which just gave up a bunch of points in their win against the Chargers. I will warn that after that, looking ahead in the Patriots' schedule, going to be rough. They get to play the Dallas defense and the Jets defense. But for next week, Bourne could be an option. Another deep league option that might be worth picking up if some of those other names aren't there is Josh Reynolds. You might have forgotten, back on Thursday night, he actually did some damage, got 80 yards, and he's effectively serving as the number 2 target in that offense. Now, a lot of this is because Jameson Williams is out. Well, he'll still be out 5 more games, so you got some time to see if Reynolds can put up some numbers. This team will pass pretty frequently. Reynolds can get deep. That's kind of his specialty. He's not going to necessarily collect a bunch of receptions. He's more of that vertical threat, but he's shown that he can get behind defenses, and you know what? They're going to focus so much on the sun god. I think Reynolds will have more than one game where he's fantasy relevant. And here's a guy I really didn't think I'd be talking about, especially this early. So if I asked you who the leading rusher for the Chargers was in week 1, well, you'd be right. It was Austin Eckler. But did you know that Joshua Kelly got the same amount of carries as Austin Eckler? And if it wasn't for that one long run, Joshua Kelly would have outperformed Austin Eckler. He had 91 yards on the ground. That's right, Joshua Kelly, 91 yards and a touchdown. It's pretty clear he's not just the backup here, not just a handcuff. He's the change of pace back, and he's going to be spelling Eckler quite a bit. I'm not ready to say that he has standalone value that you wouldn't be starting him, but clearly looks like a strong handcuff. If you do have Eckler, you want a piece of him, but also a guy kind of like with Algier, this might be kind of a 1-2 punch thing if the Chargers are really planning to mix and match RBs. And I think it's obvious now that Isaiah Spiller is just not part of this team's plans. If you are looking for a quarterback for next week, I think the clear choice here is Jordan Love. Look, even without Christian Watson and, well, supposedly banged up Romeo Dobbs, even though he looked just fine, he went for 3 touchdowns, 245 yards. For some context here, last year with the same Green Bay team, Aaron Rodgers, the future Hall of Famer, he threw for 3 touchdowns once the entire season. And Love has already done that in week 1. Now, he's not going to get to play the Bears every week, but still, Love looked sharp all preseason, looked really good this game, didn't make any mistakes. And again, he could get Christian Watson back next week or very soon thereafter, and that's just going to make this offense way more explosive. And if you do just stream quarterback or you need somebody for whatever reason next week, the Packers do play Atlanta, which is pretty nice. And then I'll say we spent way too much time talking about tight ends and backup tight ends and streaming tight ends this week because we had to with Kelsey and Andrews out. Hopefully both those guys are back next week and there's no more tight end injuries. But in reality, there's a chance it happens. You're looking for a tight end. Right now, my pick is Hayden Hurst. And not just because he caught a touchdown, right? There's plenty of guys who can do that. But he led the team in targets and reception. It wasn't a huge line, 5 catches, 41 yards. But again, the fact that rookie Bryce Young kept looking to his tight end over and over again. This happens all the time. We say the tight ends that have the most value are the ones who they have a limited wide receiver core, right? Some guys who just aren't standouts. Or when you have a young, inexperienced quarterback who's looking for that safety blanket. In this case in Carolina, we got both. And look, this is a Frank Reich offense. It's always friendly to the tight end, Hayden Hurst, a pass-catching tight end. He's not out there to block, so this looks like maybe a perfect marriage. Now, I don't love Hurst matchup for week 2 because it gets New Orleans, which, as you saw, pretty good defense, and they're really good against the tight end specifically. So if you just need a streamer for next week, I'm actually going to prefer Hunter Henry. As I mentioned, get the Dolphins. Could be more offense in that game. But long term, I think Hurst looks like the strongest pickup. Those are some of the new faces and names that you should be knowing so you can pick up off the waiver wire. Some of the guys who are breaking out maybe early in the season. But what about those studs that maybe you should be worried about? Check out the Panic Player video so you know what the deal is on those guys who were duds.